is that usually, I mean, we have a chat in the server where it's like the uh it's the leftist for each chat, but pretty much in person is always going to be more nervous than like online, because you never know,
Mhm.
crazies, they'll like pepper spray you or some shit like that.
Yeah.
But the only time I've ever gotten like crazy like nervous was whenever I debated this one Muslim who like what got really angry at
Oh
me.
no.
Yeah, and he like he started saying about like sodomizing people. I'm like, what the hell? What?
What?
I was like, I'm like, please just stop.
That's crazy. Wait, what were you? Were you just debating him on religion, or was it something else?
I was debating him on the. Basically, we were talking, and this is the thing. Is like, I've talked to Muslim women before, and they're Muslim women are more open to like talking. But here's this Muslim guy, and pretty much we're going in depth on the Islamic dilemma, and I came prepared, and he's like, "Oh, you stupid Americans! So you know that." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this guy." I'm like, yeah. It's one of those things where I'm like,
Yeah.
if I turn my back right now, this guy's actually gonna kill me.
Yeah, he's gonna assault you, dude. They don't play around. They don't care, you know?
Yeah, but
It's kind of crazy.
but yeah,
But nah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
I like the college campus setting, because I think we definitely need more people involved in the college, like the college scene, in sense of like evangelizing or talking to young guys, because
Mhm.
in that video that you saw, I was with my friend Gabe right there, and he's younger. He is like 19 and is just going through college. Um,
Mm.
but basically, the college scene is very much like it's just a cesspit of all these people. Like there's a professor that came up to try to get rid of us, and I had all the paperwork, and I'm like,
Mm.
so much for diversity of thought, like to actually talk through these ideas or anything like that. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know how that stuff is. They don't actually mean that.
mhm.
Their whole thing is very close-minded. I think wasn't there a study that came out and it literally like shows how liberals are more close-minded
Yeah.
compared to like conservative. There was like something that just came out this year.
Mhm.
It's not even close. Like it's completely different.
Yeah. I did want to say I do appreciate you what's it called, joining and having this conversation and stuff like
Oh
that,
yeah. Yeah,
cuz
no, dude, it's thank you for inviting me for sure.
yeah, as I said, whenever it comes to like I try to do the TikTok debates with like there's this one guy named Mike Burgundy. I've offered him to debate him 3 times on transgenderism, like the scientific
Oh
research
no.
behind it, and he's denied me all 3 times, besides like the one clip I got that I uploaded. Probably, and he gets so mad whenever I try to explain it to him. But yeah, like the college scene, as I said, most of the time the people who came up to us were young guys. They were young guys who were interested in it. The young girls, they don't come up. Like they don't come up.
Yeah,
So
I mean, honestly, with the women, you'll probably get more if it was like a bigger like if you get like a huge group of people coming up and watching, I feel like that's when they'll come up and talk to you, you know? Because
mhm.
there's more people there and they'll probably feel a little bit more comfortable giving their opinion. But I feel like guys, they don't worry about that too much.
Yeah.
Um,
The
but no, that's good you do that. But I did see, dude, I did see that one video you uploaded. It was like a minute long where you did the TikTok debate and the guy just muted you within the I was like, base, this guy, dude, you know you cooked him and he was just like he wasn't ready.
yeah.
But it was
The,
good. It was good.
yeah, it's always funny because I do a lot of my apologetics around like abortion and stuff. And it's gotten to the point where like I literally know exactly what they're gonna say before they're gonna say it in the conversations. And when that guy brought up that thing, is that like I read through, like I brought up Poland but like there's even other Latin American countries, and I just like got off rip, and it's like rather than going through like the point or anything, he just mutes me, and it's like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
But
Wait, do you watch The Crucible by any chance?
yeah, I do watch Andrew Wilson a little bit. I just watched his debate with Daniel Hikikachu. I'm like, oh my gosh. It, but
Yeah, I like that guy a lot. I watch him.
yeah,
But
Daniel Hikikachu is like actually insane though. Like,
is that his real name?
yeah, he's the guy he debated, but he had a debate with Michael Jones where he defended child marriage, like
Ugh.
in front of everyone. I'm like, how like it just baffles me how you can go in front of a crowd of people and be like, if a 12-year-old reaches maturity, it's like, what the hell is wrong with you? like
Dude, what?
but it's crazy.
No, that is crazy. But it's good that you that's actually why I said yes, just because I did check your channel out first. And obviously, like we're both like we're pretty much in the same ballpark. Like
Hmm.
I, I'm not gonna say no to this because I like talking. And I feel like you and I probably agree on a lot more than because I'm not a liberal, but we do have some disagreements, but
Yeah,
I still appreciate the offer. I'm
yeah,
excited.
yeah. I definitely get that. Because I think that primarily, I'm not sure how you would describe my views versus the way it branches off. Because I did watch your video on response to a Southern conservative. I did think it was funny, but like,
Yeah.
but I will say the thing I noticed is that I mean, there's the neocons, which are like the Reagan era conservatives. Andrew Wilson is like more of like a strict Christian nationalist, like paleo conservative, like old right. But
Mhm.
I like I guess that would lead then into my first question then, like what does like America first actually mean then?
Well, I mean, America First, the whole idea behind that essentially like as a movement came from Trump when he did his uh, was his first like January speech after he won in 2016. It was like 2017 he gave a speech, and in that speech he talked about how we're going to be America first, we're going to put America first. And ever since then there was like a small group of people that kind of latched onto that. It became like a almost like an offshoot of MAGA. And then obviously you have someone like Nicholas J. Fuentes, who he's probably the main like arbiter behind that movement today. He made like a show called America First. He pushes it. And essentially now the idea of what that is today simply is just a country that doesn't constantly do things that benefit others above its own citizens, essentially like immigrants, foreigners. If you want to talk about Israel, it's a country that will prioritize its own veterans, its own children above others. That's like kind of like the goal and the idea. As a movement, I will say it's not really like completely set in stone compared to like other movements or ideologies,
Hmm.
but that's basically the idea and the concept. That's kind of like what people are shooting for.
Yeah, I
Is
think
just
yeah, I would say I, as you said though, like with the left in general, is that you brought up that study where they all think the same, but like
yeah.
they're kind of a hive mind. But I do know with the right, like what the reason I asked that is because we had we have Matt Walsh, who's saying that he's America first, and then you have then I think of the Fuentes meme where it's like, "Get back to work, get back to work, Matt Walsh." Like,
Do not criticize Israel.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Um,
guess is that I would agree to like I do think that we should prioritize American citizens before other countries. I definitely agree with that. I think like and I when I shot you an email and my stance on Israel in general is that I definitely am like I try not to be a non-intervention or sorry, I try to be a non-interventionist with a lot of my foreign policy because I think the problem is that not only is war costly, but your people are going to die in war
Mhm.
in general. And I mean, after like World War II with Japan and stuff, like we deliberately rebuilt the country of Japan, like from the ground up. And like Japan's a successful country now, besides maybe like the anime and stuff. But like,
It doesn't like anime.
yeah, but pretty much, yeah. I think that when it comes to the Middle East, is that what we tried to do is like after Iraq and Afghanistan, especially, is that we're like, yeah, let's institute this um liberal republic that
Mm.
has principles of Adam Smith, John Locke, and like Christian values in a predominantly Shia or Sunni Muslim country. And
Mhm.
what happened was it just led to chaos because they didn't believe in it like at all. So
Yeah, well, also is the thing with the Middle East too is it's kind of the only part of our foreign policy that in a weird way has been dictated by Israel. Like every time somebody benefits from any of the things that goes on with us being involved in the Middle East, more often than not, Israel's like the only one that benefits. Even the US sometimes like we won't gain anything from it. And that's because that's kind of like the goal is Israel's main goal isn't to have peace with other people in the Middle East. It's actually to destabilize those separate countries because their main goal, like their main plan is to become a world superpower. Like
mm,
Israel wants to be like we are, like the US, but they can't do that yet. They're not strong enough, so they use us as a way to aggressively expand. And that's why even when Israel has like peace with certain countries, they're never really at peace. There's never like a moment for the neighboring countries over there to build themselves up, invest in their own infrastructure. And that's why when we try to bring regime change with like our foreign policy, that was never really the goal. It was always made to kind of just mess things up. And this idea of us, the only way we can be safe is by bringing freedom and liberty to, like you said, that doesn't work with their culture either way.
mhm.
So not only do you have a rejection from the people that inhabit those countries, but you also have the people in our corner, our greatest ally. They're kind of making sure things get messed up on purpose because it
Mhm.
benefits them in the long run.
Yeah, I think definitely there I would argue that there is motives with Israel where they want to be powerful. I mean, Israel hasn't disclosed, like, we know they have nukes, but
Oh
they,
yeah.
they haven't disclosed that they
Yeah.
have nukes. Like, their military technology is far superior than all their other Middle Eastern countries. Like, their jets and tanks, AI,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. Like, they definitely want to be powerful. And that's why I don't think the US should be involved in that. Like, people try to make the
Mhm.
argument from like general strategy in the Middle East to kind of project ourselves, but I mean that kind of happens with US business regardless of our military. Like for
That's
example,
true.
like the countries that we buy from are going to be influenced. And even Saudi Arabia and stuff like that, things are waning off in Saudi Arabia because we buy their oil. Like we buy
Mhm.
their oil. And actually this is off topic, but like did you know like in Saudi Arabia they can like make it rain whenever they
Yes, dude, they do the cloud seed farm. Yeah, that's where
it,
that, like, began.
it's weird.
They
Like
spend billions of dollars every year to make rain, dude, it's crazy.
I'm like that shit's wild. But
It is
yeah.
wild.
But
We
yeah.
do it in Texas once, and then a flood happens.
Yeah, and that but when it comes to the Middle East, I think I agree that Israel and I would say that Israel, but I guess the point where I differ off a little bit, maybe with the GROYPERS, I guess is that what if you that's what you want to say, is I think a lot of countries, part of the Eastern world in general, do a lot of crazy stuff. Like I mean, this is anecdotal, but I even had a buddy who went to India not too long ago that I talked
Oh,
to. Uh, Yeah, the poop town. No,
Bro.
but pretty much the thing is that he said whenever he went there is like you might find like a nice neighborhood here or there, but the big difference is that you can bribe the police. Like you can bribe the police, and there's organizations of the government like actively working against its people, or even I mean, there's many militaries in Africa and stuff that
Oh
just
yeah.
like they'll kill you. What country was it again where there was the Google GPS or whatever, where it was like zoom in, and what country is that? Is that Nigeria or is that Sudan?
Nigeria? Are you talking about the Google like GPS?
Yeah, Google GPS, where it's like there's like a, I'm not sure if hopefully YouTube terms of service doesn't, but uh like a genocide or whatever where there is like a,
Oh, you mean with the farmers?
yeah, with the farmers and
South
stuff.
Africa. And then also there's another thing going on right now with the Christian groups where they're
Hmm.
just straight up getting slaughtered right now. It's not even it's actually kind of insane how our government hasn't even commented on it because it's straight up like that's happening like right now. Like they're just getting gunned down. It's
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah, I know that I did see the only thing I saw was Trump did make a remark about the Christians being killed, but I'm not sure if I've heard any action being taken or anything like that.
Or was that on the farmers? Because he brought like those people came to the White House
Hmm.
and he like showed them the videos of all the tombs or the crosses.
Hmm. I would have to check on that because I that's the weird thing with the news cycle is that like it will come in and they'll be like, oh yeah, here's this serious human atrocity, but then it just like goes away. Like
Mm,
but yeah. So I guess also my problem with even the America First movement is like I remember I was
mm.
watching a debate with it was Destiny, which I don't like Destiny at all. But
God.
basically it was Destiny versus Nick Fuentes. I think this was back in like 2016. And I
Oh.
I guess it was they were talking about how like he's Catholic but also what Americanism means. And Fuentes deliberately says that uh like Americanism is a heresy. I guess whenever we talk about like an American First movement, like if you want to say that Americanism is heresy and support like a new Catholic America, you can do that. But I guess is that I worry that it's kind of the branding of the movement kind of suffers like an internal problem where if like I see it even among Antifa, like they'll say like Antifa just means anti-fascist, but they deny
Oh,
the people with the dyed hair who will like punch you in the face for like
and they
whatever
have
reason.
groups where they organize.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is like when it comes to America First, it's like, oh yeah, America First, but Americanism is a heresy, and like I don't really believe in the Constitution of the United States of America. It's like
Oh, I see.
I think that's like a problem in that view.
Yeah, so when it comes to, like, stuff like that, that's definitely, like, an older, debate, and I don't think I've seen that one. I've seen, like, some of the other ones because 'cause they've done, like, a bunch of debates, him and Destiny, at least back then.
Hmm.
Um, but with, like, the argument of America kinda being a heresy, like, a lot of people in America First, they kind of see the future of this country as like the only way it can be saved is if it's also a Christian nation. It
Hmm.
has to put God first among everything else, and that's the only way we can return to like or not even just return, but that's the only way we can make America as great as it could be is it has to be a Christian nation first and foremost. Because I think you and I would both agree, even though a majority of Christians would, call themselves Christian, it's not really a Christian nation. We do tons of things, even especially with our government, that are completely degenerate and it promotes very anti-Christian behavior. Like our government actively promotes things that destroy like the family structure and
Yeah.
and you like like you get it. It's so a lot of people in the movement do kind of see it as it has to be like a Christian nation. But with the idea on like the Constitution, and this is something that I don't necessarily agree with, but if I have to play like devil's advocate, I will, because I understand why people feel this way. Because I've talked about this in a few videos, and there are a lot of people in the America First movement. And Nick, I believe himself, he's made certain comments on this too. Um, he hasn't straight out come out and said that this is the way he thinks, but a lot of people in the movement do feel this way. They feel as if the Constitution as a whole worked really well up until about 50 years ago. And then ever since then, it's kind of just been used to make our lives worse and to slowly deconstruct and destroy America, which technically that is kind of true. We're constantly doing things, and every time someone uses the Constitution as an excuse for something politically, it's kind of to just make your life worse. And a lot of people, a lot of younger people, they feel like, well, the Constitution doesn't work anymore. And so they feel like there needs to be a rapid change.
Mm.
Some people, I've seen some people call for just total chaos and violence. But those people, I will say, they're not necessarily American first. They're just kind of on the right side of the spectrum. And then I've seen some people call for how we need to not have presidents. We need to have like essentially kings again.
Like a
Bec-
constitutional monarchy. Yeah.
yeah, because the public essentially with our Republican democracy, because it's a republic, but the way voting works is it's really just idiots that don't know what they're doing electing people who purposely just lie to you and then just in turn take away your rights slowly, but it does happen. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people feel like, because the way the Constitution works, the way the amendment system works, it was put in place to safeguard your rights and your freedoms, and it worked for a very long time. But slowly but surely, it started getting used against its own citizens, and a lot of people feel like it's kind of too late to use the Constitution, to use the court systems to fix things. We have to get rid of it or put it aside. And I mean, ultimately, if we did that, we both know it wouldn't return. Like if you get rid of the Constitution, chances are it's not coming back.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I think
that's kind of the point of view that they're coming from.
yeah, I see your point. I think the main thing is that I think when it comes to America is that I definitely agree that I think the problem is the Constitution was meant to work within a Christian framework, though.
Hmm.
Primarily, where, as you said, like, for example, here's a debate over things like obscenity. Like, for example, like, pornography in a Christian view can be considered obscenity, or if you make a billboard that has something like that involves nude or lewd images, that doesn't fall under free speech. But however, as you mentioned, people on the left generally be like, "Oh, that falls under the First Amendment. You're allowed to do that." Or whatever, without having the theological or cultural precedent behind that. And
Hmm.
I do see that point. However, I think that whenever the reason I would worry about that is that whenever you go after the Bill of Rights in general, especially the like it's one thing to talk about the later amendments, but I do think the founders intentionally made the first 10 the most important amendments. Like,
Hmm.
and I worry is that once we start talking about the Big 10 of the country, like I feel like that's the foundations of our entire country. And like if we if like we start questioning or at least think about editing those fundamental amendments, is that I think we're in for like a shit show pretty much. Like
Hmm.
we a lot of things can change, and I know people talked about it with getting rid of the electoral college, but like if we're talking about getting rid of the First Amendment, well, the First Amendment I think is probably the most sacred amendment in the U.S. But
Hmm.
like if we're talking about, oh, you don't have a right to a fair trial, you don't have a right to remain silent, is that I think that can get very dicey very quickly.
No, I completely agree. Completely agree. So that's why I'm not necessarily like for that. If you want to repeal the 19th Amendment,
No, oh my gosh.
I'm with you 100%, man. Let's get rid of that. But I mean, because that is the problem, is that a lot of what makes this country great and what separates us from every other nation, essentially, like our amendments, our our processes, they have been weaponized against us. And pornography is a great example. Like, the reason why pornography even exists is because the people who invented the magazines and revolutionized the porn video industry with home movies and then eventually porn, on the internet, their whole goal is to subvert Christian ideology. That's literally the whole purpose. The guy who founded Hustler magazine and all these things, and people always say, "Oh, well, it's because they're Jewish," and well, technically, yeah, it was a bunch of people who they don't like Christians, and they understand that when you do introduce things like sex, like nudes, into a public space, it does slowly destroy the society. There's this old quote from like a warlord. I don't know who it is, but I know it's a real quote. And it says, like, if you want an easy way to destroy a nation, just make like nudity and sex like free and open.
Yeah.
You'll destroy a
I,
nation by doing that.
I think I know
But
what quote you're talking about. But here's an even more interesting thing because you brought up the 19th Amendment, and like I it was interesting because I looked into a statistic is that women, but after there was first wave feminism and stuff like that, so women got the right to vote like 10 years after most men did. I think that was like August 18th, in the 1910s somewhere. But
mm,
pretty much women actually voted more for like conservative or Republican like parties than men. It wasn't until the second wave of feminism where they started to um like vote for what's it called, more progressive policies. So like pretty much the second wave feminism was especially about getting rid of gender roles, or the idea that
mhm.
they thought that having a male head in the household was inherently oppressive, that it was evil, like pretty much equivocating it to slavery and stuff like that. And it's really weird because um, I did say about modern dating in general uh, in my email, but people talk about young men being radicalized, but if you've seen the statistics, around 80% of girls, like
Mhm.
18 to 25, I don't know how old you are, but
Yeah, 27.
27, but
Mhm.
they voted for Mamdani.
Oh
They
yeah, they carried him, man. I saw the research.
And what I'm saying is like 60% of men usually like identify as right wing, but you're talking about like 80% of women. Like
And there's
are
more women on average too. From like a numbers standpoint, there's usually more.
Yeah, and that's the thing where it gets a little weird because we have a problem similar to what is seen in South Korea, where the young women are going super far left, like super
Mhm.
much like the egalitarian, like democratic socialist route. And then we have men who are shifting more towards the right. And I think that I did see another statistic that was very sad to see, where it was, I think it's 7 million men right now um do not, like, they're capable of working but they're not working in the US right now.
Like young men or just men in general?
I want to say just men in general. Like, they're
Mhm.
able-bodied but they're deciding not to work. I would suspect that they're probably younger off the face of it. Um but I do think that there is genuinely like a meaning crisis among young men in the US.
Oh, completely. Nihilism, lack of meaning, lack of purpose, and there's so many reasons for that. A big reason obviously is because there isn't as much faith. in America. Thank God that Gen Z men are becoming more, um, they're getting saved more and
Mhm.
becoming more Christian than like any other generation before them, which is good, but it's still a small number. But with that, plus like the lack of like actual role models, the deconstruction of the family, like you have like, for instance, with like black families, right? A lot of the times, more often than not, they don't have a father in the home. And that causes a lot of young black men to have issues with, for instance, respecting authority because they have a lack of authority in their household. And so obviously they're going to go out into their communities and have a lack of a respect for the authority in their neighborhood or to the police or to the city. So you see something like that, but then with like white families, which this is almost just as fucked up, they have a father in the home more often than not, but the father isn't a good role model. They're just weak. They're either weak minded or they're very pathetic in the sense that they don't really stand for anything. They don't really set a good standard for what being a man is. And so you have all these men that don't have role models, they don't have faith, they don't have purpose, and then they see the future. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I went to college. I didn't, but I have a lot of friends that, like, most of my friends went to college. Pretty much all of them graduated. Out of all the people I grew up with that went to college, graduated, I only know 2 that got jobs with their degrees. Both of them were in the medical field. There was a girl I dated, she became a pharmaceutical doctor, and then another guy, he became like a he's I forget which type of doctor he's pursuing, but just them. Just them. Every other person I know who got a degree and has a job, their job didn't require the degree. So now you have younger men looking to the future and saying, well, college isn't for me because I'm just going to get in debt and I'm not going to be able to use my degree for anything to get a job. The
Mhm.
economy's messed up. I don't have a good role model. Women are insane because they're all feminists and they really have a lack of purpose and meaning. And, of course you're going to have numbers where they don't want to work. They don't want to participate. There's another study that was done, and I think this was like 2 years ago, where I think it's something like 15% of men that are Gen Z, they don't have like a close friend.
Mm.
Like they don't have like an actual friend in their life.
Yeah,
So
that's sad.
yeah, dude, it's honestly, if you want to talk about, and I haven't made a video really discussing this, but I'm going to be honest with you, you could talk about every issue. You could talk about abortion. You could talk about Christianity. You could talk about Israel. You could talk about America first versus MAGA, whatever. If you don't if there's not a way to solve the crisis that is among young men, this country's doomed.
Yeah.
100%. It doesn't matter if America First is in charge or MAGA or liberals, because young men become the leaders of a society. And if
Mhm.
they are just completely checked out, there's no saving it. There's no country where that happens where it survives.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what we see though is with young men, I think young men have definitely been bullied a lot by these mainline institutions. But
Mhm.
I do know, kind of what you're saying about like weaker men is that, not to, I say that now I'm going to pick on men, but like pretty much like more men than ever are like obese, for example. Like more men are obese than actually women, as I think as proportionate of the population, like of their group. And I
Mhm.
think whenever it comes to like um men particularly, is like I think a lot of guys are purpose driven, and when it comes to the guys who are opting out of working now too, is it's like I think a lot of guys have the mindset of, oh, I want to work to provide for my family. Like I have money, I can buy things for my kids, I can go out and spend time with my wife or things like that. But as I
Mhm.
said, whenever you have the population so fractured with relationships, I think it drives people to like, what's the point of working? Like it all
Mhm.
it's just entirely self-serving, and it's like it's literally like doomer pilled, like like like
Yeah, it
like
is.
because as you said. What happens though, and I worry about the next 10 years, and I would agree that regardless of the movement, is that if we don't figure out a way to fix the meaning, I'll call it the meaning crisis, if we don't figure out a way to fix that, I think that eventually young men are going to have to find meaning somehow in this world, and it might lead to nasty things, is what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
Like, because I think I always think of these feminists where they always bring up like, but men are violent. But the thing is like bad men are violent. Yeah, but the thing that stops bad men is also good men who know how to use it
Mhm.
responsibly. And what we see is like even with like political violence, especially now too, is I can only suspect that's going to get way worse in the near future. Um, have you seen the
Mhm.
channel What If Alt History?
Oh, yeah, the what's his name? Richard or something. What's his
Yeah.
name?
Oh,
What a
sure.
fault. Dude, yeah, no, I watched him. I remember I went on like a huge binge because he had a video on like the incel revolution, right?
Hmm.
And then he had like a few others. Yeah, I like him. I like him. I haven't seen most of his newer stuff, but I've definitely binged him for a while.
Yeah.
But
Eh,
he made good point. Like what you're kind of saying, he made like a video kind of talking about that.
Yeah, I
Um,
think young guys definitely are going. I think he made a video why young men will revolt, or maybe that was Nick Freitas or something like that. But it's like, yeah, if men don't have like a role model or something to look up to, they're going to find one or try to create one, whether that's through the government or some political movement. And
mhm.
I think yeah, we pray and see what happens because of course it's my generation.
I
But
mean,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm a little older, but I'm still part of Gen Z. I'm just at like the very beginning.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like you and I, we're gonna be the ones that have to deal with all of this. You know, the Gen Xers, the Boomers. The Boomers are on their way out. They're not gonna be here for the
Hmm.
consequence. And it doesn't look good, to say the least. Um, and it's kind of you have to be careful when thinking about this stuff because it is very, black pilling. Like I get why certain dudes get into this stuff and it becomes like a depressing thing for them. Like they don't see a way out of it because it really does get grim and it is the main issue. And it's kind of crazy how nobody really acknowledges that issue. I haven't seen Republicans or the GOP as a whole acknowledge young men, and I definitely haven't seen the Democrats to do it. The only time the liberals, talk about young men is when they're trying to get them to vote for them.
Yeah.
It's like we lost them as voters, and they don't care. And it is a big issue, and it's like it's that old saying where it's like if there's a kid in the village and if the village treats the kid like crap, the kid's going to set the village on fire.
Yeah.
And you said a lot of these young men were bullied, and I got to kind of see the beginning of that when I was younger. I remember like experiencing things and telling my parents, and they wouldn't believe me. They would be like, "Oh no, that didn't happen," or "No, they don't say that about kids," or "That's not what they're saying about guys." And it's like, "Nah, they're saying this stuff. They're kind of treating us like trash." And no, none of the adults were believing in it. But now everybody knows. But it took like a decade of just younger men in the society getting completely abused. And then anytime any kid had any like objection to it, they were put on medication. So it's just,
Yeah, you're
and a
out of
lot of
there.
people, yeah, a lot of people would say, oh, it's engineered. And I mean, there definitely are fifth column people in our country who don't want this country to survive. So you could say, yeah, it's engineered to some degree, but also there's a lot of people that just have not been paying attention.
Hmm.
And kind of like the reason why I like the America First movement is because it is mostly younger men. And for the most part, especially with Nick, and I know with talking about Nick, a lot of people, they don't like him, and that's fine. I didn't like him for the longest time either until like this year. But it's really the only movement right now that has any relevancy, that has any momentum, that is kind of prioritizing
Young men.
younger men.
Hmm.
And I mean, if you watch the Tucker Carlson interview, Tucker Carlson, he had that moment, it kind of blew up and feminists got mad where he's like, "Well, why aren't young people getting married?"
It's the women.
And yeah, he's like, "Well, honestly, it's the women." And I mean, get mad all you want. You can hate Nick Fuentes, you don't have to like him, but if you watch that clip, everything both of them talk about is 100% true. And
Yeah.
you never heard Donald Trump talk about that. And I mean, he's a boomer,
Hmm.
so he's not gonna know. But you never hear any of these other people talk about it. So it's kind of getting to a point to whatever movement is going to actually address that particular issue, I feel like is going to be the movement that wins.
Yeah, I think
Um,
we've had like I do I worry about it shifting to like a male form of feminism, which I see more with like Myron Gaines, because like I notice where it's like they kind of portray it like, oh yeah, just sleep around, like make money or stuff like that. Like it's still the materialistic lifestyle, but I think that if we focus on, as you said, I think it is, I think, a fact that young men have been told, especially after things like the Me Too movement in general,
mm,
is like the amount of crap that guys have gotten for just like being dudes in general, where it's like you had the kill all men hashtag or like all
mm,
men are GROYPERS or stuff like that. And it's like that's gonna leave a bitter taste in people's mouth, especially after like they go on dates or whatnot, and like rather than feeling like nervous or anxious, like oh my gosh, like this person likes me or not, it's just like it's bitter, like it's recognizing these patterns, like oh did I say something wrong or all this, like it's literally like metagaming for dating. Like it's so cringe. And I think that I do agree that the reason why Nick Fuentes has surged in popularity is because of his appeal to young men, particularly, and um, I think that's why he's going to continue to grow is because of the feelings of young men. But
mm. And I mean, even if you don't like him, right? He's kind of a necessary figure right now because even if you disagree with like that movement or what he represents, and he talked about this, I think, last night. His goal for like the next 2 years is to kind of have the America First movement be separate from him. Because right now, when you think of that, you think of him basically,
mm-hmm.
and he wants it to actually be a movement, not just his following. So that's kind of like his goal. But even if you don't like that, the reason why he's necessary in a good way is because it will inspire other men, hopefully men who are Gen Z like yourself, like younger guys, not old dudes, not Gen Xers, not boomers, and unfortunately not millennials either, because these people still don't really completely get us. Um, but somebody who is from our generation to come up and start leading and push for another movement that still benefits men, and maybe it's in ways that you agree with more. So either way, I see Nick as a really like good sign for things to come, especially with the reaction he's getting from a lot of different people. Obviously, he's edgier than most people. I mean, if you get banned off everything and if you get shoved into the most random corners of the internet and then if you get banned from those, you're going to be a little edgy. That's just how it
Mm-hmm.
works.
Yeah.
But it's a good sign for things to come because it's going to inspire more younger men to actually take these issues seriously. And it will create a competition of ideas, and that's what we need. We need people to have debates, have discussions. And that's why liberals don't like having discussions, is because when you challenge their ideas, they fall apart, because their ideas are basically like it's made out of like sand. Like there's no
Mm.
foundation half the time. That's why they eat each other alive
Mhm.
all the time. And a problem that we're having now with like conservatives is the more traditional boomer conservative style
Just
of
work harder, bro.
Republicans or whatever. Yeah, they're kind of replicating that same energy. They're like, well, we can't have these conversations. We can't talk about women. We can't talk about women being a problem or young men having these issues because that's offensive. And it's like, well, we have to be offensive. And until somebody comes up and is going to have the discussion with Nick and debate him and actually does it in good faith and is able to beat him in a debate, he's going to keep, like you said, he's going to keep gaining momentum and a following. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I'm kind of a big supporter for him. And I really do like him. I'm not going to lie. I support him and I agree with like 90% to like maybe 95% of everything he says. Some stuff, not so much. But I definitely see it as like a good sign for the future.
Yeah, I think I do agree the flaw of the old guard right, or primarily I'll call them the boomer cons. Pretty much, like, I think the big thing is that what led a lot to stray down this route is that they prided themselves on being the party of free speech, the party of like, let's debate and have our best ideas win. But then whenever it came to certain topics, is they just kind of shut it down for similar reasons as the left did. And I I do agree with you. I do think that we need to have debate and discussion, and I think a lot of that is kind of similar to what Charlie Kirk said, that like once people stop talking, that's whenever bad violent stuff happens in general. Cuz
Mm.
I know even there's this one atheist uh online, his name's like Genetically Modified Skeptic, or Drew Durnell, and
What?
pretty much he makes these videos and he's like, I don't want to debate with right wingers because they're a bunch of ignorant idiots. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, that's a really good precedent to set, like to set with
Mhm.
people, because it just is going to build resentment. So I definitely agree with you there. But I will say, I think it can be a good thing of the direction. It's just that it depends on the leadership that gets a hold. And I have some stuff that I want to bring up, but so I wanted to talk about. I saw in your one video is that you're talking about race, and I think this new. It's called race realism. Like when you say race is real, like what does that mean to you when you say race is real?
Well, to me, I don't mean it in like a traditional sense. And it's kind of my fault because I have said that, race is real. And I think I did say I'm a race realist in one of my videos. And I didn't really describe what that means because the way I see it is kind of different than the definition.
Okay.
And the definition obviously is what a lot of people they think like, oh, black people are just stupid because they're different race and white people are superior, like all that traditional
Mm.
jazz we've all heard. And I've seen all the arguments. I've seen the people talk about how, well, Africa didn't have a will or whatever. And well, it turns out, I mean, parts of it did have a will before colonization. It's just sub-Sahara Africa basically didn't, but that's because they didn't really have roads or terrain. That's you know the arguments they make. They make all
Yeah.
these arguments saying they weren't whatever. I don't necessarily believe that. I believe in IQ, but I believe in that for like any race. In fact, I made a video called titled "Not All White Americans Are Equal,"
Yeah, I watched that
and
video.
I
The
I
Latinas.
actually bro, dude, I got so because a lot of people that watch me are obviously white.
Yeah.
They were mad at me for making that video, but
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think somebody like anybody if there's two people who have a low IQ, if they're just stupid
Hmm.
and if they have kids, I don't care who they are. I don't care if they're black, Mexican, white, French, whatever you want to say it. Statistically, no matter the race, if two people who are stupid have kids, the kids more often than not are going to be stupid. I know there's an argument to where if they live in certain types of communities, they can still have like a higher IQ than their parents, which is true. But statistically, more often than not, it doesn't matter. If you're stupid and white and you have kids with somebody else who's stupid and white, your kids are going to be stupid and white more often than
Yeah.
not. So when I talk about race realism, the way I see it, and I don't like the fact that I view things this way, but the way I see it is it's more from the sense of tribalism. It's not necessarily this group is more genetically superior or higher IQ or what have you. It's more from the sense of, unfortunately, in this day and age, especially in a country like America, which for so long we were kind of sold the idea that there is no race, see people, judge people off off their character rather than their skin color. We're a melting pot. We can all assimilate with each other, which these ideas kind of did work and they could work theoretically, but it's just been driven to a point to where it's kind of unsalvageable at this moment in time.
Hmm.
Like, unfortunately, people do see race, and the only group that really doesn't think like that are white people.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because white Americans were the ones that had to buy the idea that there is no race because they were the majority of the country. And now, statistically, after boomers die, and if you don't count like all the liberal freaks that, don't want to have kids and hate their own race, because, there are groups of white people that hate white people.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you don't count them and if you get rid of the boomers, white people that are left, it's going to be like 37% or something like that of the country. And the problem being, there's going to be a majority, and the other races, they do see skin color. They do judge people. They are tribal. And because of that, they look out for each other. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think people should do that. And they keep to their own. And also, like in ways with certain groups of foreigners, mostly like Indians or Islamist groups, they don't assimilate. And it causes a lot of problems. So when I talk about race realism and how people see race and people see color, I mean from the point of view of just basically tribalism. And if you want an example of that, I mean, unfortunately, we have two of them this year when that girl got stabbed on the train
Sarutska. Yeah.
by a black dude, and there are people celebrating on TikTok just because it's a white girl. She's not even American, but people thought it was funny because she's white. When Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck, there were people who thought it was funny and liked the fact that they got to see this dude die because he was white. They came up with the excuses after that. And so other groups in America, other races, and it's not everyone, but I would have to argue it's a majority of them. They do see race. They do judge people based off their skin color. And if we're the only ones as white people, if we're the only ones that are not playing that game, but everybody else is, we're going to lose. And with that, Christian traditions, American traditions, that will die out with us. And the country will, like we see it in some cases, it will evolve into kind of like a third world shithole.
Hmm. I I definitely I so your belief is more, as you said, like the tribalistic, which usually whenever I see race realists, it will be like, as you kind of said, the idea that my race is genetically inferior. Sorry, my race is genetically superior, inferior. So I think
Mhm.
your belief is more nuanced. Um, but whenever you brought up, like for example, like with the wheel, is I think a good book that you would probably like to read. It's called Race and Intellectuals by Thomas Sowell, who actually goes into that. Where so like, for example, the wheel, like many countries like Aztecs, we thought they didn't have the wheel whenever we came here, but they did. It was just like on their toys, pretty much. And the reason why is because they got around using things like alpacas in I think it was Peru, rather than the horses that grew in or reproduced in Europe. So pretty much not only the animals around, but also the application of using things like the wheel changed how these societies uh, operated. But I also wanted to bring up I do think a lot of other races do see race. Like, I mean, just talk to a Hispanic person. But
Oh yeah, you telling me, dog?
yeah,
You telling me, dude?
yeah, yeah.
Trust me, I know.
And then pretty much, I think I think the one point I disagree with is that that race is the reason why is the primary explanation why certain groups are behind more than others. That it's intrinsic, which Nick Fuentes kind of said with his interview with Candace Owens, and here's why. I did make a big video about it, but pretty much there's two studies that I think are very important when we talk about race. And the one is by Sandra Scar, but also the other is by Jim Flynn in 1991. And the Sandra Scar study found that pretty much whenever black orphans are adopted by white families, is that their IQs once they grow older turn out to be like 106. While if you have a white family that is, two white parents and white kids, is that the IQ is higher. Usually, like, we're talking like maybe probably like 112, 113. But the 106 of the black child is still higher than even the white average. And that was Sandra Scar's study. But the more interesting thing to me was the Jim Flynn study from 1991, where it found that Asian Americans have higher IQ scores now than what they did back then. And there's also James Flynn, which is known as the Flynn effect, which IQ scores increase as we develop in terms of abstract thinking. So what the study found was that Asian Americans scored lower than native born whites. I think it was in the 1960s. But then over time, is that they actually surpassed whites. And I guess is that my thing is that of course genetics impact like intelligence. Like even I'm actually technically half ginger, fun fact. But
No.
but like basically if you're ginger, like if you anesthesiologists will know that because you react to pain differently just for the fact that you're ginger. And I think
Really?
whenever it comes to like IQ and stuff, is that obviously there's genetic components to it, but there's also I was reading studies from the British Medical Journal that even habits like eating high amounts of fatty foods or high amounts of sugar during like pregnancy can impact a kid's intelligence along with like smoking weed whenever they're a kid. And I think that there is a solid case that what we see, unfortunately, in um, Alaskan Native or even Black neighborhoods, is that a lot of their diets, especially in the South, it's a little bit with rednecks, but not as common. Where the food they eat is like very high fat, it's very high sugar, like it.
It's a
I,
sweet tea.
it's a
They
sweet
gotta
tea,
drink the sweet tea.
but then once they get older, because a lot of these family structures are destroyed, is that unfortunately they choose things like marijuana to smoke, which might also be affecting like their neurocognitive development as well. And I think the primary factor that ultimately is going to impact these IQ distributions, and Daniel Kikuchu, as I said, was debating this with Andrew Wilson because in Pakistan, I think most of the population is actually what's it called? Products of incest, and that's why their IQs
Yeah,
like
I remember hearing about that a long time ago. A lot of them literally are like mentally retarded. They have like Down syndrome and stuff.
yeah. And what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, is that I think it comes down to our culture. Is that our a lot of the times the left will just blame it on the system, like, oh, the reason they stole a plasma screen TV was because of some rich capitalist, and it's like, no, that's not why they did it. But I think that to just sum it up as, oh, it's an intrinsic like black nature that they wanted to steal, I think is kind of like icky to even think about. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to things like our family structure, our health, and how we manage that. Two parents raising their children, uh,
Mhm.
and things along those lines. But also to address your other point, I think that whenever we talk about race, it's important that to note that some cultures do not assimilate with others. Like, I think when it comes to culture or any group, is that it's kind of like complementarianism, I guess is how I describe my position. Like, I am less concerned about Hispanics coming to the country who are Catholic than, let's say, Somali Muslims. You know what I'm saying? Like,
No, yeah, I get it,
yeah,
100%.
but yeah, that would be my most of my position on
No,
race.
no, and I actually like I'm not as like studied obviously in the genetic side, but I wouldn't doubt like any of the stuff you brought up with the IQ and the environment and the dieting. Like obviously that plays a huge role, and that's the kind of the sad thing about this. And that's why I said earlier like I don't like the fact that I see it this way, but I'm coming from a perspective of just I'm just coming from a realistic outlook on the way things are going and where they're headed,
Yeah.
not on what it could be, because what you're saying is correct. It's like 100%. The culture is completely like the main key. And when you can assimilate different races into the same culture, and if it's a culture that promotes families and learning and education, obviously all those people are going to excel. And that's why like Asian Americans are, kicking everybody's ass. I think the dude with the highest IQ in the world right now, he's like half Japanese, half American or something like that. But the problem is that the assimilation part, and like you said, some cultures they just don't mix well. But also you have certain cultures that are here that just kind of refuse to mix. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
with black communities, I mean, what is their culture? Their culture, a big proponent of it is relying on the governments for, food, money, assistance, not working. And then when you have the opposite end of things, you have gang violence, you have promotion of degeneracy and murder. And I mean, obviously, we all know music and stuff like that plays a role on the way you think, especially if you're constantly smoking weed and listening to murder music all day, every day, and you don't have a job, and you're probably not going to have a good future.
Oh yeah.
And that's where it's like the problem is. And I know a lot of it was pushed because of, for instance, certain Marxist groups that entered the U.S., certain communist infiltration, certain Jewish groups that came in and engineered certain things, and then just certain people who actually bought into all this bullshit with they're like the liberals and the people that hate white people. They bought into like all these ideas that white people are evil and all this different stuff. But essentially, we have a society in America where people aren't assimilating. And when they do assimilate, they find themselves in the country. You don't see a Muslim come here and try to become an American. They look for a Muslim community.
Hmm.
What community can I move to where there's 20 mosques and the women are not allowed to go outside without a male escort type situation? And I
Like
mean, you see
Sharia.
that
Hmm.
you see that in Texas. Texas, like Dallas, for example, they've had like what is it, like 30 something mosques created in the past like 2 years. Texas had to pass a law banning Sharia law from the state because because what they do is they come here and they don't try to assimilate, and that does become a problem. And with the race tribalism, unfortunately, you have the groups that don't assimilate, and then you have the ones that are here that maybe at some point in time their relatives or their ancestors were assimilated, but through Marxist theory and all these things and like critical race theory, they themselves have kind of like de-assimilated from the country as like, becoming communist or Antifa or whatever you want to say. And you have all these groups that they just don't work. And a lot of it is based off race for them.
Mhm.
When something horrible happens, unfortunately, like with somebody, let's say with somebody getting stabbed in the neck on a train, or some woman getting, to, kind of censor myself a little bit, graped on a subway, which happens more often than people want to admit on at New York. And all these different instances, the first two things people look for when they hear about these stories is, when it comes to the people who are involved, what's the race of the people and what gender are they? And
Mhm.
as soon as they get the answer to those two questions, their subconscious, their bias, all these different things come into play, and that affects how they react. That's why, unfortunately, you have people who celebrate when Austin Metcalf gets stabbed at a track meet, who celebrate when Charlie Kirk gets shot in the neck. They don't even know about the politics. They don't even care. It's just they pick a side already,
It's
and it
identity
is a racial
politics.
thing for them.
Yeah.
And the problem being is that for white people, that is a reality. And I'm not saying we can't judge people based off their character. I'm not saying we shouldn't strive for having that system with assimilation, because it does work. But we have so many forces in opposition to that, and unfortunately they won. And there has to be a different approach to all this. And that's why, like, for instance, on my channel, I've been calling for people pushing remigration with certain groups, for instance, like Muslim groups and Indian groups, because they don't assimilate at all, and it is racial for them. They see race completely. They only look out for their own. They purposely will go out of their way to screw over other people who are not a part of their race. You can't have a society function like that, especially America, you know?
Yeah. I think kind of adding on to what you're saying, I noticed that even among some of my black friends where it's pretty they've said it where any form of acting a certain way is considered whitewashed. Like let's say you have a black guy who like dresses in a suit and tie.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't speak in Ubonics or anything like that. Like he he's whitewashed. It's just because everything it's just all about being white or whatever, and it's like when did I think that's a problem primarily with Christianity, primarily in the sense of what the left did to it in general, because the
Mm,
foundation for good moral character, like Christianity is a virtue ethic system. Like it is that's what sin is. Sin is vice in general.
mhm,
Like so once you get rid of most Americans identifying with a mainstream Christian culture and it's just you do you, bro. Like you do you. And like what happens is that you can't you can't say that someone did something like there's flaws in someone's character in that sense, I guess. There is no objective way of saying, "Oh yeah, you did something wrong," I guess.
mm,
Like for example, if you had a black or white guy and you said, oh yeah, and I see with even Cam Higby, like when they argue some cultures are better than others, um, it depends on the metric by which you're measuring it by. In the sense of, let's say that we're having like, what would be a good example? Let's just use violence for the sake of it. Is that if one culture says that violence is okay, and the other culture that says violence is not, but they both fall under the same belief system, you can say that, oh, that culture is wrong. Because, as I said, the authority is God's moral law in the Christian view. But I think the popularity of things like cultural relativism, in the sense of like, oh yeah, not only do we have these groups that they do identify as like, okay, I am Muslim, I want to change these systems, is that you don't have a standard to say that they're wrong by. Like that's just, and that's what even Andrew Wilson talks about, is that it's just their personal preference, bro. and it's like, and it's
Yeah.
like you can't do anything about it. And I think it's a really big problem, because I think at the end of the day is that we both agree, regardless of our views, is that we do need a Christian framework in order for our society to function, I think.
hmm No, completely. And it sucks because it would be, and I know it would be a great system if everybody was on board, but it kind of like, like you said with what Andrew Wilson says, it's their preference. Unfortunately, Islam is a religion of conquest.
Mhm.
It is not in their goals to make peace with a Christian nation just by living there. No, their goal is to conquer that nation. And they do that through birth rates. They have a bunch of kids, they take on several wives, and then you see it. It almost happened in that one city in, I think, Minneapolis. They almost elected that Somalian dude. He lost, thank God, but I mean, he lost to a gay dude, but whatever. But they almost won. That's the point, because their goal is to slowly conquer a nation. And I mean, just look at the UK. I get several people all the time, even Canada. Oh my gosh, I made a video about Canada the other day because someone asked me a question if we should make it a 51st state. I don't think we should. I made a video, and I've been contacted by like nationalist groups from Canada saying, "Well, we need to talk to you about this. What's going on with immigration? They're conquering like everything. We don't have jobs. Everything's turning Indian." And I have people in the UK and Australia telling me what's going on over there. And it's like it is a sign of things to come if there isn't change in America. And unfortunately, it is just their preference. They don't have any goal of coming here and following the moralities we have. And you have to understand, it's like it is a cultural thing, yes, but it still doesn't change the fact that these people from that culture, they are a certain race and they identify with that race, and that race means everything to them. And if that's just the culture, it doesn't change the fact that that's their preference. That's what they believe in. And there are cultures where something like, you know, grape against women isn't even a thing. It's not considered bad because they have no concept of consent.
Yeah, Iran
They
with
believe in it.
marriage and stuff, they don't consider it.
Yeah. So it's like it's not even a thing. It means nothing to them. And I mean, just the other day, I saw not even just Iran. I saw like there's a video that went viral of this girl. She's traveling all over India, and she technically wasn't in India. She was in that little like it's not an island, but it's that little like part that's like connected through a land bridge.
Hmm.
It's like Sri Lanka or whatever.
Sri
She
Lanka.
was there. Yeah, but that's basically India. Like they're basically Indians. And she was there traveling, and some dude stops her on the road, asks her for sex, and then she says no, and then proceeds to pull out his dick and starts jerking off in front of her. And
Wild.
she has to drive off because she's worried this dude's gonna do something. And this video just came out like 2 days ago. You can't have these people coming here, and that doesn't mean everybody who does come here operates like that. But the problem is enough of them have come here to where they don't have any plans on making peace with us. They don't like us. They don't like our God. Indians don't like Jesus at all. If they're religious, I don't know. A lot of people don't really talk about that, but like Vishu, whatever their God is, like
Vishnu. Yeah.
Vishu, dude, the stuff they talk about when it comes to Jesus, it's like almost as bad as like Talmudic Jews talking about Jesus or even Islamists. It's like they're not coming here to make this country the way we think it should be. And so there has to be kind of a change. And we do have to kind of kick those people out. And a lot of those people, they're not even here illegally, they're here legally. And that's kind of like the problem. That's going to become a big problem going forward because you see in these countries, like in the UK, like in Ireland, the stuff that just happened with that little 10-year-old girl just like a few weeks ago. I'm not going to go into specifics because it's YouTube, but this like horrible. And their entire government's protecting this foreigner, and they might not even deport him. for
Wild.
doing like all these horrible things. And it's just, they're serving the non-citizens, the foreigners, and those people are purposely coming in there and taking over. That is going to happen in America. It technically happened in New York. If you want to think about it, besides women, the biggest like voter base for Mandani was foreigners.
Yeah, foreign born. Hmm.
And so it is something we're going to have to talk about. I don't think America should be a purely white nation. People get mad at me when I say that, by the way. They get mad at me for anything. I literally,
Oh yeah,
it's crazy. But, and
I know that
you've
feeling.
dealt with
Yeah.
crazy people, but it's like there is going to have to be a change, and it's going to have to be big, and it's going to have to come with some force.
Hmm.
We're going to have to be the ones that say, hey, look, actually, our culture, our beliefs are better. That's what we want. If you're not going to get with the program, you have to leave.
Hmm.
Because if not, that's gonna be another thing that destroys our nation, and that's a ticking time bomb, almost just as important as like the young men.
Yeah, I think both factors are going to be. I think immigration, even especially legal immigration, is going to be uh, a factor at play because a lot of people, even I would say some people on the left, is that conversations about a lot of people imagine a country like some economic zone that you can just kind of like walk in and it'll be all fine. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that every situation's the same, but as you said, is that when people see stuff like that, that's what happened in Ireland. It's what radicalizes people. I mean, it's kind of what happened. I mean, Gypsy Crusaders situation was a little different, but like
Oh yeah.
what I'm saying is that when people have experiences with violence, but also this blatant disrespect of institutions or um like a lot of these mayors too. I mean, there's Mamdani, which got voted in. There's mayors in Seattle that are like socialist that are trying to get elected, and it it risks a lot of problems. And I agree, it's going to be a conversation for the future because you have, as you mentioned, young men that are having a lot of these problems, but that on top of birth rates, especially in Europe when it comes to Muslim migrants, is that I think by what year is it? Like by 2050 or 2060, like over a third of the population is going to be Muslim just by sheer birth rates alone. And I'm like,
Mm,
that's insane. Like that's actually
yeah.
insane.
I mean, that's the goal too. I remember when I was like in, was it middle school? It was either middle school or high school or something. But I remember for a class I had to take, I had to watch this video where it was from some, I don't know what they call the Muslim like priests. What
Me
are they?
either.
You know what they call them?
No, I don't off the top of my head.
Man, whatever that is, there was one giving like a speech, and he talked about how we're going to conquer Europe through birth. We're going to go there and we're going to have kids and we're going to take it over. We're not going to shoot anybody. We're not going to start a war, and we're going to conquer it. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And unfortunately for them, their leadership is just completely not helping. So obviously, those people are getting pretty radical. But even in America, like, there are people here that are already radical. There are a lot of guys I know that they're already ready for stuff to pop off. They don't even think there's a peaceful solution. And it's kind of hard to argue with them and say that there is, because there's a lot of doom and gloom in the future. There's a lot of problems. I personally think there's at least one more chance for a peaceful solution before stuff hits the fan.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me, because I see Gen Z as like,
Mm-hmm.
we're a different type of generation. We're not like the older ones. We're kind of aware of what's going on, and we're not okay with it, you know? So I have
America.
hope for
Oh,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
I have hope for America, but it's definitely, we definitely have to normalize the conversation on legal immigration. Illegal immigration gets talked about all the time, but legals, that's what we have to talk about, and it has to become normal. Because right now, like you said, people are kind of afraid of talking about it. They don't want to mention it because it's uncomfortable, but we need to get over that quick.
Hmm. I think it just made me think of like America: A New Hope, like some Star Wars like sequel.
Bro,
But
that's what it is. We're in Revenge of the Sith, dude. Revenge of the Sith happened.
yeah,
We got one more shot.
yeah, I that's definitely going to be the future, and I think that the left is going to hammer down on government benefits like economic stuff, and I think that they're going to also go, especially after things like healthcare, and push class consciousness and all this other stuff. And I think that's the direction the left is going to go, and they're going to kind of rescind on the immigration like stuff because they know that I don't think it's going to be a winning issue for the left. Immigration is what I'm going to say.
Mm-mm.
They'll just import more voters. But I also want to talk about, so what you did mention earlier, that there is um like there is Talmudic Jews who don't like the United States. Like I think in the Talmud it does talk about Jesus boiling in a pot and stuff like that. Is that I do the one part where I separate, especially from the GROYPERS, is I think a lot of people equivocate a bunch Ashkenazi Jews, like the ethnicity of Jews, with the religion of Judaism, and also people where they have family that are Jews. And I think um I was reading up about uh like for example the owner of Nvidia, I think I forget his name, but like
It's
he
like the Asian guy, right? Yeah.
no, he I'll have to find wait, no. That's Nvidia. This is who's the people who make ChatGPT?
Oh, you mean Open AI?
Yeah,
Is that
OpenAI.
what it is?
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, is it Sam? What's his name? Sam Altman or something
Sam
like that?
Altman. Yep, that's his name.
Yeah.
But in an
Him and his
interview,
boyfriend.
he said that he's Jewish. But then like Tucker Carlson asked him like, "Do you believe in God?" And he's like, "What do you mean by that?" Like, I can't like I believe there's a creator, but like he doesn't interact with the world and stuff like that. But what I noticed is like he said that his family was Jewish and he identifies as Jewish, but he doesn't like practice like an average Jew does. And that was
Mm.
also what I said. I think a good book to read is Race and Intellectuals, where Thomas Sowell talks about how a lot of there are kind of middlemen minorities that end up being successful in different countries. And Jews is that, I mean, if so, a lot of people would say that Jews are white, especially those on the left. But I mean, I'm kind of indifferent about it. I'm like, if you want to define them as white, like, it's really not too big of a deal with me. But when it comes to different minority groups, is that like there's cases like Japanese Peruvians, there's Chinese in Southeast Asia that were successful like in countries like Vietnam or Malaysia. And even though like if someone saw a Chinese person and a Vietnamese person from the West, they'd be oh yeah, they look the same. But they have a lot of ethnic conflict, kind of what you mentioned with like tribalism. Or like Japanese people when they move to Peru, which is in South America, and they become very successful in these countries. And when people talk about Jews and like this kind of monolithic new world order, is like I don't deny that Jews are successful in the US and stuff like that. Like they hold a lot of wealth. I guess my big gripe is that to say that all Jews are a certain way or that the Jews are cooperating as this big monolith to get rid of like to encourage I don't know like race mixing or to get rid of white people and stuff like that. I don't deny that there's people in power who are like that, but to just pinpoint it as the Jews, I feel is a problem.
I get what you're saying. So I got to be careful because with YouTube you have to be careful what you say about this subject.
Hmm.
But so there's a lot to say about what you brought up. So
Also, by
the
the way,
thing
before you get into it, if anything, I'm gonna probably edit this beforehand, so I'll let you know if like I had to censor stuff for YouTube for TOS. I'll let you know about that. By the way.
Okay, okay. No, that's cool. That's cool. But for instance, for Jews in general, it's not all the same thing. It's like they're a very small percentage of the overall human population. I think they're under like, or I think they make up like 0.2%. Like there's less that technically like fully blooded Jews, there's less than like 16 million in the entire world, at least as far as like the UN is concerned. But the problem being is it's very complex in the sense that there are a lot of different types of Jews. There are some Jews that are extremely religious. More often than not, most of the time they're not. Um, there's also different like variations. You have Jews that are very, for instance, they're very loyal to like Israel, and that's kind of where like their heart is. It's in that homeland, it's in that country. And then you have Jews that are just full on blown communists and they believe in a world utopia where there is no God, there is no family, and they push for those things. And the reason being is because the the creation of like communism comes from two Jewish men. It comes from Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And the guy who mentored both of them was a man by the name of Moses Hess. And Moses Hess was the guy who wrote the book Roman Jerusalem in the late 19th century. This is a book that was used to inspire Zionism. It was also used as a rally cry to Jews all over the world to essentially become separatists in their own countries, to not assimilate. And it essentially started the idea of Jews going to Palestine and colonizing Palestine and creating a Jewish country. And where these groups of guys differed is Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels went the way of full blown communism, obviously, because they took it and they made it into Marxism, the version we have today. Because communism was technically made by a French dude in the 1700s, but that nobody cares about him. But they
Yep.
went the route of universalism, no property. You know, we're all gonna live under this world order. And then Moses Hess went the route of we need to have our own country and we need to be just loyal to that country no matter what uh, country you live in. You're not American and Jewish, you're just Jewish. And when it comes to, and so that's why there's so many different variations and groups. Like when you think about something like Marxism, feminism, all these different, like when you talked about second wave feminism, where that came from was like Marxist
The
groups
Frankfurt
in
School.
America.
Yep.
Yeah, it came from like all these different people that essentially just hated patriarchy and hated the family structure and the man, because the whole goal of Marxism is to deconstruct the family entirely. That's what they believe. They believe the only way they can achieve utopia is to not have a family in place, because having a family means people are loyal to their family. They need you to be loyal only to the system essentially. And then with the other Zionist version of Jews, which are kind of just loyal to this nation, and that's why there's so many different variations. And I don't really believe in like a cabal where they have like meetings every Tuesday and they talk about how they can like,
It's actually Wednesday.
yeah, every Wednesday they talk about how they can make your car engine light turn on, and it's like, but they do have a pretty insane amount of power, and they've kind of always had that, because the way Jews kind of operate is they believe they have to have power, because if they don't, they'll be destroyed. And a lot of these people, they're not religious. So there, for a long time in America, there was an idea that somebody who was Jewish was religious, but that's just not the case. All of the men that I just talked about, the communists and Moses Hess especially, they were all atheist Jews. And even Moses Hess, him, Nathan Birbaum, Theodore Herzl, which these were the guys that made Zionism become a political movement. They were the reason why Israel is even a thing today. In fact, all three of those men didn't even die in Israel. And Israel, like almost 100 years after their death, reburied their remains in Israel because they're seen as like fathers of Zion. None of these people are religious. The majority of the prime ministers in Israel aren't religious. So, like, there was an idea for a very long time that to be Jewish, you had to be religious. That's just, it's not the case because the way a lot of them view it, at least more so the Zionists, is it's based off blood. It's, are you born Jewish? That's who you are. The only time Moses Hess ever used in his writings any like quotes from the Talmud or the Torah was just to convince religious Jews to support the idea of Zionism. They themselves didn't believe in it. They didn't believe in race mixing. And so the idea of like a Jewish global order, it's like, it's not like those 3 a.m. documentaries you see on YouTube where it's like they're talking about black cubes on Saturn and the Freemasons.
Agartha.
You know, that doesn't do anybody any benefit of talking about that stuff. Now, if you were to tell me like, hey, go to this lodge, and if I were to go there and if I was to see that stuff with my eyes, then I'd be like, okay, it matters. But most of that stuff is just baloney. Like that it doesn't matter at all. But what is real, Israel. But what does matter is the fact that there is a lot of people who are Jewish who hold power. They have a lot of like vast amounts of resources. They control banks, credit systems, pretty much all the media. I mean, Alphabet, which controls Google, YouTube, all these different platforms, they were founded by Jewish men. Skydance, which is fixing to buy Warner Brothers, which controls all these news corporations.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much every newspaper except for the Washington Post, because that got bought out by Jeff Bezos, was owned by, was started and owned by Jews. History books, publication books, all these different things. They were founded and run by people who had connections to Zionism. And so the idea behind all that is their ideology is based off one of blood. It's about that you're born as a Jew and that you have to separate yourself from the rest of the world. It's the only way we will survive. And the way it works is they do have a transnational movement in the sense that they are kind of looking out for each other. That's why like they only make 2% of the population in America, but they run all these agencies. There is a lot of truth to that. And so it's kind of complicated to just nail and, cuz it's literally there's so much to go over and I'm probably not doing a good job explaining any of it
Oh
because
no.
that's the thing is like
There you go.
there's a lot to talk about. Like it's an insane amount.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is when I brought up that book Roman Jerusalem, I made a video on my channel before I had like any subscribers. It was called the true father of Zionism. And I had to do a lot of research for that video. I read that book. And funny enough, you can only find it online on like Marxist websites, which is crazy. But I read that book and in the book it straight up talks about colonizing Palestine, not just taking Jerusalem and making peace with everybody else. It talks about taking over like everything. And it does call Jews, no matter where you are. If you're a German Jewish person, you're not German, you're Jewish. If you're French and Jewish, you're not French, you're Jewish. It calls people from all over the world to have an undying loyalty to a Jewish state and to each other. In fact, there was a quote from the book where it said, any Jew who wouldn't do that is a traitor to their religion, their family, their own people. Like it hammered away. And when this book came out in the late 19th century, it went all around the world. It was in basically every like major Jewish publication talked about it. It got translated into like every language you can think of. And it is the reason why Israel is even a state. they have murals dedicated to these people in their embassies. And it's kind of hard to nail down, but the reason why so many people, especially in the America First movement, are so kind of like, you could say, obsessed with the Jew question is because they have an insane amount of influence in our country. It's kind of funny, but the two different variations, communism and Zionism, those are two different types of groups that have a lot of influence in our own country. Marxism with the institutions, you went to college, you saw it for yourself, and then Zionism with our politicians. They buy out pretty much every politician you can think of, and if you don't go over to Israel and kiss the wall, you become enemy number uno. Like there is a loyalty, there is a push for a certain supremacy. And you could say, well, it's a religious thing because there are religious Jews. And for them, it's about rebuilding the third temple so their Messiah can come back. And I'm not going to go into all the different variations of that because there's actually a lot of messed up stuff. But then you also have a lot of atheist people who are Jewish, and it's completely just blood to them. It's nothing about God or religion. In fact, a lot of the times they see themselves as God. They view themselves as God. George Soros, who's a pretty, he's a pretty big problem to us. He's Jewish. He had an interview back in the early 2000s where he said, "I see myself as a God."
Mm-hmm.
And he's constantly interfering and doing things to socially engineer other countries as well as our own. So that's kind of where like the obsession comes from. There's like a lot of things to cover, and you can spend literally like 10 hours talking about it.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, like you already know. You're like, shut up already. Like I get it.
No, no, no.
But
I definitely. Well, I think that my thing is that I do think I would have to check because I know there's Frederick Engel, but also I know that there's uh, Hegel, and I think Hegel influenced a lot of the left. I'm pretty sure he was German, but that's as you said, there is German Jews and things along
they
those
were
lines.
all like German. All those guys were pretty much all German.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing is that I mean, like a lot of my genetic ancestry is even uh, German, and I'm like, am I gonna find out that I'm Jewish secretly, or like, like, but it's a psyop, guys.
0% interest
Yeah,
loans.
but yeah, I'm just like, okay, but I think when it comes to Judaism or who's Jewish and stuff like that, is I think that what I kind of am getting at is, for example, I saw an article in the New York Times, and the New York Times also has Jewish influence. I think it was founded by a Jew. Um, and then there was an article in the Times of Israel that said, "Oh, the Times of Israel says, oh yeah, the New York Times is anti-Semitic." Okay, and when I hear all this stuff about the Jews and whatnot, is that I do think that there might be a form of camaraderie in the sense of like, as we talked about earlier, like if someone is Hispanic, okay, like they're going to gravitate towards their in group of other Hispanics, or if they're black, they're going to gravitate towards being black. And I think that what I've seen is with people who are Jewish is that they kind of gravitate towards that culture of like, okay, these are kind of our beliefs. And I think there's the secular Jews, and then, as we mentioned earlier, the religious Jews. But I think, I guess, is why I kind of reject the proposition of, uh, like, I guess it's organized in the sense of like, I do agree that Jews control a large amount of power, which I'll address that later. But I know, like for example, Ben Shapiro, I know he's an open Zionist, for example, but like his social beliefs are not the same social beliefs as like Karl Marx or something like that. Like if you asked both of them their thoughts on gay marriage, I feel like you would get two completely different answers. Or like what even talk about class where Ben Shapiro supports laissez-faire economic systems and whatnot versus Karl Marx who believes in seizing the means of production. Is that I think that with any ethnicity, you're going to find people who have a certain in-group preference, but also in-group preference, but also disagreement within them over something that is central to their identity, like Israel, where a lot of ethnic Jews kind of have like this gravitation towards Israel, whether that's culturally or uh, what was the book that you mentioned?
Roman Jerusalem,
Roman Jerusalem.
by Moses Hess. Yeah.
Okay. But I do want to say is that I think when I hear a lot of the kind of, I'll just say, I think it is almost an obsession with Jews where pretty much it almost kind of, not to straw man it, but I do know some people where it's like their girlfriend breaks up with them and it's like, oh, the Jews caused her to hate me, bro. Like, the Jews did that. And it's like,
She
no.
showed her my search history.
No. But, like, what I think of is, for example, if I think of tech companies, okay, in the US, is that a lot of tech companies, there's Palantir, all right, which I think is influenced by Jews to some extent. But also
Oh yeah.
a lot of the tech companies are also Chinese. Like if you look
Mm-hmm.
at like Huawei, I mean that was what the big problem with TikTok is and stuff. And I think there was even a case in Texas of some Chinese agent, and I think there's influence from a lot of different like governments and organizations in the United States. And I think to kind of like just pinpoint it and be like, "Oh yeah, it's the Jews." Like kind of seems like a stretch to me in the sense of
Mm,
like I think that there's more factors at play, I guess is what I would get at.
no, I mean, and you are right. To a certain degree, have to make a. I'm gonna have to bring up like a few examples, maybe, but yeah, like for when it comes to like banking, like we talked about banks, for the longest time, the major banks in the world, I mean, and they still technically are still run by Jews, founded, run by Jews. They control a pretty good amount of credit in the debt systems. You have stuff like BlackRock, which is the biggest and asset manager group in the world. They're run by a Jew who's also on the World Economic Forum. He's like one of the co-chairs for that. And his name's like Larry Fink. He's arguably the most powerful man in the world, technically, because they also control a pretty big majority of America's debt. A lot of people have this idea that all of our debt is just from China. It's just that's not true at all. But with China, especially recently, I think like the top 5 banks in the world right now are from China. So there's no Jewish influence or control there at all. So you're right. There's definitely other groups involved. But the difference between that and, like, for instance, you could say Jewish influence is the fact that, like, we'll use TikTok as an example. TikTok was forced basically by our own government to sell part of it to Oracle, which is it's a it's kind of like a tech company. They're into AI, they're into like a bunch of stuff, and they own like a ton of things. And it's founded by a Jew, run by a Jew. And the reason why they forced that sale is because on TikTok there was a lot of what they described as anti-Semitism. There's a lot of people talking about what was going on in Gaza, speaking out against that, and that's actually why so many younger people don't like Israel is because of that event, and because on TikTok for the longest time you could just see videos from Palestine and all these different things going on, and it kind of radicalized Gen Z in a sense. But the difference between influence from like Russia and China, which do play a pretty big role in our country, is the United States government isn't forcing some Jewish company to sell itself to China, whereas they're forcing China to sell their companies to Jewish organizations. You know, they're not deporting young men and women who are on student visas here from this country for writing op-ed pieces in their, school newspaper or for their school paper in general or their report in favor of China or their government. People can write about the CCP, they can write about Russia, they can talk shit about America and our government and Ukraine and everything all day long. But as soon as they write about how they don't support Israel and how they don't like Israel and how they support Hamas, they get deported. That happened at the beginning of this year, like a few months after Trump got elected. In Texas, they passed laws, and even in Florida, where they and it's kind of vague, but there's anti-Semitism laws for online. You can't say certain things, and it's vague on purpose. But I'm pretty sure in the coming years, there's going to be a big crackdown on those things. You don't see that with other groups, even though there are other groups that do have resources and influence. You don't see that with anybody else. All these other companies or all these other countries that come in here and lobby our government, they have to register as a foreign lobbyist group. But our groups here for Israel, APAC, and if you want to go into like Kufi, which is the biggest Zionist group in the world that supports Israel, they lobby our politicians all day, every day. They don't have to register. Nobody's coming after, you know, people advocating for that. Nobody's going after people for talking bad about China. But as soon as you talk bad about Israel, you get a target on your back. And then also with somebody like Ben Shapiro, he kind of shot himself in the foot recently. And I have a friend who made a really good video. His name's Right Wing Coalition. He makes like really good videos. I feel like you would actually kind of like his stuff a lot more than my stuff, to be honest.
I might have seen his video here. I'm gonna look him up on my phone. You can keep talking and I'll
Yeah,
listen.
yeah, but he's a great guy. We get along really well. We talk a lot, but he made a video on Ben Shapiro, and essentially Ben Shapiro gave an interview where he talked about how if you're an American and if you can't afford to live in a city, you just have to move. If you're this and if you can't afford to be here, if there's no opportunity here, you just have to leave. You shouldn't stay in the city you grew up in or the hometown you're from. You should leave because that's what America's all about. But if you were to ask him the same thing about people who live in Israel, he would say, no, they should stay there. They should be there. And that's the thing with people like Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, all these different people. They are American in a sense, but then when it comes to an issue where they have to choose between supporting Israel or supporting America, or at least what benefits what or who, they usually pick what benefits Israel more. They'll support Israel more. They'll go after somebody who's against Israel. My voice. They'll go after somebody
Unacceptable.
who,
No.
yeah, I need water. Like for instance, when Nick Fuentes was first getting into politics, he started questioning our foreign aid to Israel, and Ben Shapiro, went after him and called him an anti-Semite just for asking questions. And that's kind of where that ladder kind of started going. And then there was that video where he was talking about, I think having sex with black people or like people mixed racing is I see it as disgusting or whatever. But that was used by Ben Shapiro and people in that circle to kind of cancel Nick when he was like 18. And it was purely because he was asking questions they deemed as anti-Semitic. So that's kind of like where the obsession comes from. And you are right, there is infighting among every group, but you do have communist Jews, you do have Zionist Jews, and there is a difference of especially because like their ideologies are completely different. But it is the fact that it is the same group overall. And as far as like because you mentioned earlier, like talking about, well, are Jewish people white? Are Ashkenazi Jews or whatever, are they white or are they not? The way it works for them is they're white when it benefits them.
Yeah.
As soon as something happens and it doesn't benefit them, they'll say, no, I'm not white, I'm Jewish. And that's kind of the way they operate with everything. And like that book I talked about, that's what it kind of called people to do in whatever country you live in. You're only American until it doesn't benefit you, or you're only American until it doesn't benefit Israel. And then you're not American, you're Jewish, or you're this. You separate yourself when it doesn't favor you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why a lot of people don't consider Jews to be white, because they kind of pick and choose when they're white. They're not there all the time.
Schrodinger's whiteness.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, I think I thought you highlighted some key points with, so like, I think at the end of the day, whenever it comes to trust, whenever it comes to institutions or even like the Daily Wire, is that I think transparency is the main issue with all this stuff. Because like I remember back during COVID, which COVID was a while ago, holy crap. And also I did
Almost
see
6 years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm a boomer. But but I actually did see some of Right Wing Coalition's videos. I'll have to check them out more though. But basically when it came to COVID too, like trust the science or whatever, is that it led people down a similar route of what you're talking, where it's like, because they weren't transparent or like there's inconsistencies in their view, is that it led people to reject them. And does that mean like trust the experts was like the slogan for the longest time, which usually people do trust experts, usually people do trust their doctor. But because of the transparency issues and stuff like that, people were like, "Oh, I'm going to do alternative forms of medicine." Like I mean, this is also kind of a conspiracy. I guess it wouldn't be a conspiracy, but like for example, vitamin water is owned by Coca-Cola. Fact of the day. Like
Yeah.
and like they do that, yet it's in order to promote health. But the thing is that then you have other people with their crystals and shit like that, where they think that it will heal them, or like some people who think chiropractors are going to cure their cancer. Okay, and
Oh yeah.
and people pretty much trusted that more because of the problems with the narrative that people were being taught over the COVID or the coof, I guess, is if that's what you want to call it. But I guess is that my big thing is that I think everyone left or right agrees BlackRock is like basically evil. Like like I mean
Yeah.
I remember I debated this super libertarian guy way back, and he was trying to convince me that APAC was like okay and that there's nothing wrong with them, and that's a conversation for another day. But I guess my big thing is like, for example, the secular Jews that you bring up is that they were Marx and Frederick Engel, where the secular Jews, like with communism, you have to seize the means of production through the state. But then you have, as I said, as we've talked about, is that if we have other companies that are run and controlled by Jews, is I feel like if you have the government or these other agencies that have people that are willing to domestically attack or take away from your company, I think that's kind of self-defeating, but also like puts you at risk. And I can think of like a lot of left-wing ideology comes from Marx and Engel, which I'll just concede that they're Jewish, which I haven't looked too much into. But like for example, United Healthcare CEO was assassinated by Luigi Maggioroni not too long ago, and pretty much, I guarantee you could probably find Jewish people who are in leadership positions at United Health. Maybe that's true, but if we have a group of Jews who are encouraging this leftist dogma, is that it would just be, unless maybe it's this highly complex network of trying to like what's it called, like target other companies or something like that. But it just seems to me that like you have different ethnicities that have different views and different takes. But I could even concede that Jews act white whenever it's convenient, because it makes me think of Mehdi Hassan. Do you know who Mehdi Hassan is?
I do not off the top of my head.
Okay,
What
but
what
he
who's
was on Jubilee, and he's a Muslim in the UK. And what you can find is you can find videos of him back like decades ago, and he's talking about, oh yeah, he believes non-believers are like animals, like they're like cattle to him. But then whenever he goes on Jubilee to debate, he's like a liberal, he's a progressive, and stuff like that. And I think Jews are, if that's even the case, is that is actually pretty similar then to like how Muslims operate. And I guess that's the big thing is like the uniqueness of it, where it's like uh prima facie enemy number one, but
Mm,
like Betty Hassan will act like he's a liberal progressive when it's useful for him. But then the second that Muslims get power and they can institute Sharia, is like he's not going to act and be pioneering gay rights or stuff like that. Like it's entirely just a brand. And
mhm,
I think I think that there is cases where like people do get censored for opinions. I mean, there was this whole thing about hate speech not too long ago.
mhm,
But there's also I remember learning about a big thing was Islamophobia, and that was more like 2018, where it was if you speak out against Islam, you're Islamophobic, and like you just hate other people. Or I remember actually the college I went to, they taught us that white people can't be racist because African Americans already come from a systemically disadvantageous position, and white people being discriminatory is pushing or punching down rather than punching up, so it's morally different. And I'm like, not only is that the stupidest shit I've ever heard in my life, but
mhm.
like I think that a main part of critical theory, or even the ideology in general, is that different groups, even if you're right that they're more biased towards others because maybe there's money involved, is that I think that people, especially on the left, tend to defend groups by saying that your critiques of them are hate speech or whatever that be. It's just hateful bigotry and whatnot. But I guess is that another big problem I have is that I was watching actually a liberal talk the other day and my brain instantly melted. No, like basically on Instagram, this guy
Oh
is talking about, oh, the right is so close to class consciousness or whatever.
oh my
And
god, dude, I hate that so much.
yeah, and pretty much like what I'm saying is
Oh.
that I worry about when we talk about like, oh, the Jews, is that the left views the Jews as the bourgeoisie. That's what they are, like in their view. Like they are the ruling elite that orchestrates and pulls the strings in society. And I think that my view of like pretty much, yeah, there's a lot of other groups at play that kind of want pieces of the pie, also prevents leftist ideology being reframed to this framework rather than based on class, based on race or ethnicity. And because I guarantee you in the future, you're going to hear a lot more from the left about class consciousness or the bourgeoisie. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
No, you're definitely right. I get so many people who comment on my stuff and they're like, "Dude, you're so close, bro. You're so close, Tom. You just gotta." Dude, it annoys me so much.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like people like that. But because you're definitely right about where they're gonna go, and that's why like I don't think I've done a good job at kind of like framing this. But when I talked about like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, for example, and then I brought up Moses Hess, who Moses Hess, just as like a quick, you know, thing on that, he's one of the reasons why they actually met because he was a mentor to Friedrich, and they were actually best friends until Friedrich Engels may or may not have slept with his wife, but that's a whole other thing. But
Just casually, yeah.
what the reason why it's kind of important to talk about those three guys in particular is because towards the end of their friendship, Moses Hess became more of a proud Jew. Like he wasn't really proud of his heritage or his bloodline. His dad, for example, was a rabbi and then he became a businessman and they lived in like France and all this stuff. And he never was proud to be Jewish. And then later on in his life, when he was friends with Carl and they were actually all running a publication, which was essentially, like everybody had a publication back then. It's like how we have podcasts now. That's basically what they had back then, like a blog.
Oh yeah.
And it was like it was like a precursor to the Communist Manifesto. This is where Karl Marx and Friedrich were starting to kind of get those ideas forming to Marxism. And during that time, an event happened in Europe, and I forgot the name of it, but essentially, a young Jewish boy got kidnapped by a bunch of Catholics, and they forced the kid to convert to Catholicism, and they raised him as if he wasn't Jewish, and it a bunch of people found out, and it became this huge thing all over Europe. Like, I'm not really doing a good job
Well, like it
emphasizing
became
what this was.
like a
It,
controversy, like in the news and
this
stuff.
was like big for Jews in Europe, huge, and it inspired Moses to actually become more of a nationalist to his own race. In fact, his name technically wasn't even Moses, it was Moritz. He changed it to Moses to kind of honor his lineage. But when that happened, this is where he started to veer off into becoming more of like, we need to have our own state. We need to, all Jews everywhere, we all need to support each other. And Karl Marx and Friedrichs were like, they didn't go that route. They went the route of, well, being a Jew doesn't really matter to us. What matters is communism. What matters is this utopia. Because we all know with the Soviet Union, their goal ultimately was to take over all of Europe. It wasn't just to stop where they did, it was they wanted to conquer everything. Um, and thank God they failed and the Soviet Union completely collapsed. But that was their goal. And that technically still is their goal. And so that's why what I haven't really done a good job on is explaining how there are different groups and they do operate differently. And the group that is more Marxist, more communist, they don't believe in the religious part. They don't even really see themselves as Jewish to a certain extent. They believe in one thing and one thing only, and that is dismantling the patriarchy, dismantling the family.
Yeah.
That's like their whole thing. So that's where you do actually have clashes between those two groups because and you also have Jews that don't buy into any of it. They are completely against all of it. So it's not fair to say all of them. Um, but the point being made when people kind of bring those things up is they're both technically Jewish, blood wise. And that's to the ones that care about that stuff. That's really all that matters is the bloodlines, the religious part. Like you can't convert to being Jewish, technically. Some people do believe that, but the majority of them don't think that that's a thing at all. That's why, even in a lot of their teachings, they say you can't marry somebody who's not Jewish, you can't have kids with them. They see it as like having sex with animals, which is not all of them believe that, but more than enough do.
Yeah,
But the
I see what
communist,
you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, the communist Marxist ones versus the Zionist ones, they don't have the same game plan. So they are operating against each other completely.
Hmm. Yeah. I
So it's kind of weird, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I wanted to read more into it, so I'll probably check out that book, especially if you send it to me, because I said it we could probably be talking for like 2 to 3 more hours just
Yeah.
like about
That's the problem with this stuff is like when it comes to Jews, my main thing is I just don't want them to have influence in my country. That's it.
Mhm,
If
mhm.
they have their own country, I do not care. I
Yeah.
literally don't care. I don't care, but it is yeah, unfortunately it's a conversation that takes a lot of time. But I can send you the book. It's free online.
Mhm.
I'll send it to you later.
Yeah, I think my big thing is that regardless, my policy or my premise is that regardless of the group, whether it's Jews, Muslims, or even some prosperity gospel Christian, is that I think that we need to focus on corruption. And basically, is that as I started at the beginning, is that other countries have a lot of corruption, and the US has a corruption problem. Like, we do not
Mhm.
have morally virtuous or just people. And I think that our generation of young men is going to have to be expected to fill that void. Like, we are going to need very righteous men in our future to resist being sold out or tempted by all this stuff because there's a lot of money at play. regardless of the group. And there's a lot of different uh, what's it called, ideologies and worldviews at play, and I think it's definitely a situation, I guess, if that's how
Yeah,
you want to call it.
it's a pickle.
Indeed. But so the last thing I wanted to actually kind of touch on was it was in Fuentes's past when it comes to I don't know the his relationship with these people now, but do you know who James Alsop and Richard Spencer are?
Oh yeah. I know a little bit more about Richard for sure.
Yeah.
But I know what you're referring to. Yeah, the event with like the Unite the Right and all of that stuff.
Yeah, there's that, but my big thing is that so we recently had the thing with Charlie Kirk, which I think everyone on the right agrees it was a tragedy. And I think, I mean, there's the Candace Owens crowd, and there's the kind of conspiracies about who did it and stuff like that. And I'm not going to be touching on that, but I think
Yeah.
like um, my problem with this is, I guess, my biggest critique of Fuentes is that James Alsop is a what's it called? Had a pot. He co-hosted a podcast with Fuentes called the Nationalist Review. Okay, and pretty much it was an American identity movement and Identity Europa, and it even had stuff with Charlottesville involved. And my big thing is that with trusting this new America First thing, and I did know you said about separating America First from Fuentes. My big thing is that with Fuentes, is that there's Discord logs of these people, and I could send you this if you want me to. But these neo-Nazi groups under Alsa were deliberately talking about infiltrating the Republican Party, and that known as it's a strategy called entryism, where like you plant someone
Mhm.
in the party, and then whenever something extreme happens, then this new view comes into play. And I worry that with people like even Richard Spencer, who has advocated for a white ethno state and stuff like that, or this white racial empire, is that what we have, as I said, is that my focus is I want America to like make sure that we have the Constitution within a Christian framework and we handle our domestic policy without needless blood of Americans or foreign influence. Is that that's what how I would describe my view. But pretty
Mhm.
much is that in this situation is I worry that the right might have been a seed has might have been planted in the right where I just hope and pray that people don't actually go down the right of embracing a form of neo-Nazism because of um, these people's intents.
Mm. No, I understand. And with like those logs and with those groups of people, because that's kind of like what happened with Nick when he was younger. He kind of got pushed out of the conversation at such an early age. Like he got banned from like a bunch of stuff at like 18, and then he got taken off of like everything at like 22, 23, basically. And he's my age. We're pretty much the same age. And that's like crazy, but he kind of got pushed to these certain corners of the internet where for him to survive, he had to make like certain alliances, and he did have friendships with certain individuals, those two guys especially, among others, but they don't converse anymore. In fact, Richard Spencer and the other guy,
James Alsop.
I'm pretty sure they don't like Nick at all anymore, because
Mm.
Nick is kind of like eased off on certain things. But I will say, however, with like you talking about the neo-Nazi thing, unfortunately, even without like Nick's influence, like without his influence at all, really, because of the issues we have with immigration, with race, with all these different events that are going on, and also with just Gen Z men, Gen Z white men especially, kind of being told you're toxic, you're evil. It did create kind of a perfect breeding ground for
For
those
that.
ideologies to kind of like seed itself in. And that is definitely a thing, but it's not because of Nick. Like there are a lot
Yeah.
of people that are like for instance, Gypsy Crusader, you mentioned him earlier. Like he truly like if and obviously what happened to him is messed up. Like anybody who would be in that situation, you would probably be insanely angry. People coming after your mom, your family, you going to prison, all these different things. It'd be horrible. But there's a lot more influence besides Nick. And because of like events recently with like Gaza, Palestine, a lot of people went to certain corners of the internet where they were getting kind of radicalized. I made a video where I talked about this specifically, and I kind of made the argument that, like, well, I mean, you can't have a society that says being a Nazi is evil, Hitler is evil, and in turn, it's the same society that wants to cut their kids' dicks off and promotes pedophilia to a certain extent and is just demonizing people and is just completely degenerate. Like, it's going to make younger people think, well, if they're saying this person, Hitler, is bad, and if they themselves are doing bad things, then maybe Hitler isn't such a bad guy at all. And then that causes them to go to certain parts of the internet where the only people who are having those conversations just straight up love Hitler, right? So they get influenced by these things. And that is definitely something that's happened. But as far as like America First and as Nick as like a movement, and trust me, because I've encountered a lot of these same people. I mean, I'm going to be honest, a lot of those people watch my videos because they just like right wing content in general. They'll watch whatever, but they hate Nick Fuentes because he's not right wing enough. They hate America First because it isn't completely, advocating for an ethnic white state. They hate they get mad at me because I tell people not to go outside and start shooting people. I tell
Mhm.
people not to resort to violence. I tell people that there is a peaceful solution we can pursue saving our country, but there definitely is a reaction that is kind of coming from that place, but it's not from Nick at all.
Mhm.
And I know, like, because of certain groups and individuals he was connected with at certain points, it makes people think that. But if you dig into like his shows, I don't know if you watch his shows, but if you watch him and if you pay attention to the way he deals with people that talk about that stuff now, he's pretty much completely distanced himself from that. And those people have distanced themselves from him entirely. And me being who I am, saying that I'm a groyper and making these types of videos, I kind of get to be a middleman and I get to deal with those people all the time.
Mhm.
And it is scary. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, it goes back to that saying of, if you're going to have a village that treats a child a certain way, you know, don't be surprised when that child sets that village on fire. And
Mhm.
that is where that's an issue. We talked about young men being an issue. There are a lot of young men that don't even want a peaceful solution. That's not even
They're
on their
just fed up
bingo
with it.
card. Like they don't think it's possible at all. And so they're going into those different areas. And so, yeah, that's definitely a thing, but it's not coming from the America First movement. And that's actually one of the reasons why those people hate the America First movement, because they're not advocating for those things. Um, if you pay attention to a lot of the shows Nick's kind of done recently, he's been dealing with a lot of that from people leaving comments and inciting those things.
The
And you
super
can even
chats.
look at my
Yeah.
yeah, you can even look at my comment section on certain videos and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So that's actually why I made a video specifically addressing um like people calling for violence. And I didn't really do the best job because I kind of larped certain other groups in with that group in particular. And so I kind of pissed those people off. And so I
Mhm.
had to make a second video kind of like, hey, I didn't mean you guys. Um But I mean, that is definitely going to be something going forward, but that's not like a goal from this group at
Mm.
all.
Yeah, I would just say that going forward with the America First movement or anything, I guess what my point is that I worry that there is that influence within that group. And I think that it's great that you definitely, as you said, I mean, you even made the video, not all white people are created equal, which I guarantee that probably got you a bunch of flack. But,
Oh yeah,
but like,
you did. Yeah.
but like, what I guess is what I'm saying is that is it's just important going forward with, as we mentioned, with young men, is that whatever right wing movement is that we have our arguments and we have our reasons of why not to embrace something as radical as these guys who, like, as we talked about, like with Gypsy Crusader, who just straight up hates people and stuff like that. Like, is that people make memes or whatever, and like you can talk about memes and modesty and all that, but my big thing is that
Mhm.
I I don't want, I guess, is that people's sense of humor shouldn't be turned into them like flirting with these ultra extreme ideas. And I guess it is going to be a test of peop of young men's character, I guess is what I'm getting at, where it's like we do have a lot of young men who are picked on and stuff like that. And as you said and used with your analogy, is that I think that there are going to be more men who are going to be bullied, harassed for their beliefs, whether they're a Christian or not. And it's just that, like, I just hope that I hope I guess what if alt history put like the left works like a dial and the right works as a switch, and I guess is what I'm saying is like I just pray to God that if that switch flicks, it doesn't turn into like neo-Nazism. I guess is what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
is that like it almost? I worry that I just pray that these people who have influenced the movement in the past, it's not like, have you ever seen the movie Alien, where it's like
Yeah.
the chest burster or whatever, where it's like, oh, the person's like, oh yeah,
Uh,
guys, I feel fine today, and it's like, oh, my chest really hurts right now, and and then it's like, I just hope
yeah.
that's what America First doesn't turn into. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. With like that specifically, and then also with like people flirting with memes and stuff, but also like and that's a rabbit hole that I've kind of been going down this year with you know how we talked about, like, for instance, COVID, and there wasn't a lot of transparency and there's a lot of lies surrounding that.
Mm-hmm.
That's also true in a way with certain parts of history, and it's unfortunately the parts of history surrounding World War II. So a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, are kind of looking for answers, and you're not going to be able to, because the thing is, that's already going to be a group. That's already a thing. There's a lot of younger guys who are straight up, they love Hitler. That's their whole thing, and that's what they want. I've seen it, and in other countries where things are worse, kind of like a look into our future with the way things are going here. It's even more so in those countries for those young men, and you can't blame them entirely because their systems, their leaders, their people have completely failed them, and so that's why they're turning to those. But if you want peaceful solutions, and if you want to deal with the men who are going to look to these groups for answers, the more extreme groups, because trust me, America First, like, is moderate, and a lot of people say that about Charlie Kirk. They said Charlie Kirk was the moderate, and now he's gone. Now you get Nick. It's now that's shifted. Nick is the moderate. He's the person who's stopping all this other stuff from getting even more crazy. And trust me on that. I actually really mean that. But the only way we're going to be able to really deal with that issue is we have to be able to have conversations with those people. For a very long time, those types of people, the neo-Nazis, the Hitler fanatics, they were shoved out of the conversation completely. And that's bad because in a society where nobody trusts any of the institutions, they're going to start looking for answers. anywhere they can, whether it's the right answer or not. And that is a place people have gone to. So they have to be a part of the conversation, unfortunately, going forward, because if you don't have a conversation with them, it gives them more power. That's the kind of like the type of situation. And I don't want America First to be that either.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
that's good.
it's like, because I don't believe in those things. Like basically the way I've kind of gone with all this stuff, because trust me, I get sent down so many rabbit holes and everything, is the way I feel about World War II now is I don't like any of the leaders. I don't think any of the leaders for any of the countries involved were necessarily good people. Everybody did something that was bad. And even during the Nuremberg trials, the United States and England purposely left out several things because they themselves were guilty of committing those war crimes. So it's like there's a lot to be unpacked there, but that is going to be a problem going forward. But it's not going to be because of Nick. It's just because this society as a whole has demonized a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, especially young men, especially young white men. And they're just kind of going anywhere else but mainstream places to find answers. And that's one of the places they went to.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, that is going to be a problem as well. I honestly think you can deal with a lot of that if we solve immigration, because a lot of the hatred that I see coming from that side, it's purely based off the immigration issues that we have. And I mean, I honestly think that's the only way we're going to be able to solve that problem entirely, because if you don't solve immigration, you will get the people who are more extreme than Nick. And trust me, there's like people who think Nick is extreme, dude. It's like that's not even you're like he is moderate compared to those people. I'm not even joking. Like it's insane. And that is an issue, that is a problem, and it should be treated seriously. But the only way to do that is to look at the causes, and the cause, in all honesty, is like a lack of leadership, a lack of faith, a lack of purpose, and the immigration issues, lack of assimilation, and then also feminism and stuff, like women not being able to kind of get along with men is a lot. It's a lot of problems, but
Mhm.
I feel like if we deal with those core issues, and as long as we don't demonize those younger men, because you can't really get mad at those young guys for going down that pathway when the alternative that they have is transgenderism,
Yeah.
is people trying to legalize pedophilia. It's going to radicalize people in that way.
Oh yeah. I like that's one of those things where it's like I obviously completely disregard their view, but I I guess I have, and maybe this is even for people because I've had what's it called? When I was in college, I was friends with people who were on the left, and like a lot of the times they do have bad experiences with people, and that's what creates their identity as a whole.
Mhm.
And as you kind of said, is that people have these problems, whether it be with their community and stuff, and they get very upset. And honestly, I we're not gonna have enough time to go through all of World War II, but but like,
Oh man.
but pretty much uh, what's it called? I It's funny because I actually got from my church the other day. They were giving away books, and they were giving away some World War II books, and I'm gonna probably be reading through that. I also am kind of a nerd. I don't know if you know the game Hearts of Iron 4. It's kind of one of those
Oh my god.
it's one of those games where it's like
Yeah.
that's why the women stay away from you, you know? But like
that means you're a strategist, man.
yeah,
You
that
got to
means
get into politics.
that I'm an officer, guys. I'm an officer. But like pretty much yeah, World War II is interesting to talk about. I do think that, for example, like the eugenics movement in general is like the eugenics movement or originated actually by a lot of humanists, and there's phrenology, social Darwinism in the United States, and there's also ties with Margaret Sanger and like all the
Mm.
Nazi doctors and stuff like that, which like uh, as you kind of saying is that there definitely was bad people on all sides. Um, I wouldn't go as far to say like uh, the Nazis or the Soviets were good people. Like I would never go far to say that, but I think that the thing is with that we kind of mentioned earlier is that with a Christian view is that regardless of people's culture and stuff, we can hold people accountable for their actions and say that this is wrong and this is right. But I think going forward, I think ultimately the big thing is I think that more people need to read their Bibles. I think more people need to start getting involved in their church and, as I said, getting involved in their communities, talking to one another. Um, because if people have that community and so on, and they're faithful to like Christianity or one of these views, I think that will be a robust wall between the far like radicals and uh, the future of the U.S.
Yeah. Um, yeah, like community, a focus on community is important, but also you just want to not exclude people, even people with far like extreme views on either side, because doing that is gonna kind of just give them more it's gonna make them feel more like they're being oppressed, they're not able to speak, and a that's kind of like a little bit of the reasons why we have the issues we have today is because slowly over time there were problems coming up and they just weren't appropriate to talk about. You couldn't have conversations. So having dialogue and conversations is the only way we can have a peaceful solution. But excluding people because they might be a little bit more extreme. And obviously you can't talk to everybody. I'm not saying you can talk to some liberal freak or some dude who just wants the world to burn. Like you can't talk to everyone, but you should give everybody a chance at least. Um, and that is something you're gonna have to be mindful of because a lot of people they're not religious. They should be, but I mean, a lot of people they don't. Even Americans, even white Americans, they don't see that as being an answer. I've seen a lot of people get mad at me because I usually say in my videos, Jesus Christ is King of Kings because I'm a Christian. Um, and they get mad at me for saying that because they say like, well, Christianity is what led America to being the way it is, and I disagree completely. And I'll debate them on that, but just saying, get involved in a church and stuff, that might not be enough for them. So you got to let those people have a voice too, because if you exclude them, that's just going to make them more angry. And the last thing we really need is more anger on either side,
Yeah.
especially now. Really, at any point, it can kind of just like if the powder keg goes off, it's done. Like it's not
Hmm.
we and even if it went off in this country, we have so many enemies outside of this country. They would take advantage of that. America would be over like 100%. So we have to kind of approach those other people, and that's why like those people watch me because I'll give them that type of respect. It's like, hey, I don't agree. I don't worship Hitler like some of you guys. I understand your arguments. I'm going to disagree with you. You're going to disagree with me, but I'm not going to as long as you're being respectful to me, I'm not going to completely cut you off. And I think that is important for anybody, like even somebody who's a crazy liberal. If they're being respectful and if they're willing to have a conversation, that's very important to have that with them.
Reminds me of the movie The Black Klansman. Like,
No.
like,
Oh my god.
uh, like,
Uh,
but yeah, I think, yeah, that's. I wanted to say I appreciate you talking to me here for like 2 something hours, yapping it up about.
really? Man,
Yeah,
I didn't even feel like
yeah,
didn't feel that long.
but
No, yeah, no, this was great. I would be down to have other conversations in the future, man,
yeah,
for sure.
as to kind of wrap it up, I think whenever, obviously, I don't think I think approaching those ideas in the sense of like we want to find the truth of the matter and we have to have solid reasoning. Like we need to, I guess it's like we need to confront our problems and confront the disagreements between them. And I'm not saying that we should just openly platform like, yeah, Hitler was cool, bro. Like, no, I'm not saying that. But like I'm saying is that we need to find, okay, this is what actually happened. This is our framework for doing so. And it reminds me of, as I brought up earlier, Daniel Hakikachu and Michael Jones. Daniel Hakikachu straight up defended child marriage and stuff. And this is the thing is that
Ugh.
he his view is absolutely sick and abhorrent, but like at the end that we need to be consistent with our principles in the sense of like, okay, we have a debate and we talk about this and we call them out for their bad ideas and pretty much that the people judge where it goes, and that's why we need to be
Mhm.
prepared for those things. And uh, the biggest thing, the radicals profit off of is inconsistency, I would say. But
No, yeah, that's completely right. But that's kind of like where it's going for a peaceful solution is the best ideas, the best arguments are going to be the ones that win. And I think we now know because of, like, for instance, Nick Fuentes being as prominent as he is now, and he's kind of like the only person from Gen Z that has the movement that he has. Like, nobody else is from our generation is kind of like in the same conversation as him. Um, but like he got banned and censored off everything, and he's still here, a part of the conversation. So we have to give people respect and have those conversations with them, and the best ideas, best arguments are going to be the ones that win. The people will decide, and we just have to pray that we're able to reach enough people for our own side, and just pray that God can lead us, and we won't destroy ourselves along the way.
mm-hmm. That's just since we were talking about Israel so much, I actually just finished up Exodus, and I guess the way I would want to finish this is that um, Moses was leading Israel, not the modern state of Israel, but Israel, uh, or the people of Christ, and pretty much the big concern is that they had the golden calf where they created these idols that distracted them from God's plan for them and God's law, God's judgment. And I think the future of the U.S. is whether we're going to be like Israel in the Old Testament. Is that, are we going to create our golden calf? Are we going to create our own idols? Or are we going to stay faithful to our what we are? So,
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%.
all right.